When 12-year-old Marcus Williams sat down at the grand piano at Riverside Academy, nobody expected what happened next. The music professor who had dismissed him as just another scholarship kid found herself frozen in absolute shock. "In 30 years of teaching," she would later whisper, "I have never heard anyone make a piano sing like that." But Marcus wasn't just playing music, he was transforming it, speaking in melodies that came from somewhere deeper than training or privilege. This is the incredible true story of how one boy's extraordinary gift shattered every assumption about talent, class, and who deserves to be heard. What Professor Whitmore discovered that day would change not just Marcus's life, but her own understanding of what it truly means to recognize genius. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of Riverside Academy as 12-year-old Marcus Williams clutched his worn backpack straps. The prestigious private school towered before him like a fortress of privilege, its Gothic architecture intimidating every fiber of his being. "You don't belong here," whispered a voice in his head as students in designer uniforms glided past him without acknowledgement. Marcus had earned his scholarship through exceptional test scores, but walking these hallways felt like trespassing in a world that wasn't meant for him. His second-hand uniform, carefully pressed by his father that morning, still looked different from the crisp clothes surrounding him. Mrs. Dorothy Chen's mathematics classroom was Marcus's first real test. The stern teacher surveyed her students with hawk-like precision, her eyes lingering longer on Marcus than the others. "Mr. Williams," she announced sharply, "since you're new, perhaps you'd like to solve this equation for the class?" The complex algebraic problem sprawled across the whiteboard like a challenge. Marcus approached slowly, his mind working through the solution with ease. But as he reached for the marker, Mrs. Chen's voice cut through the silence. "Actually, let's have Tommy handle this. He's been with us longer." Tommy Richardson, a confident blond boy in the front row, smirked as he took Marcus's place. The message was clear: know your place. During lunch, Marcus sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, quietly humming a melody that seemed to flow from somewhere deep within his soul. The tune was complex, haunting, and beautiful, though no one was close enough to hear it. Sarah Mitchell, a young music teacher, paused near his table while collecting lunch trays. Something about the boy's quiet demeanor and the soft melody drifting from his lips caught her attention. She'd heard many students attempt music, but this was different. This was pure. "That's a beautiful tune," she said gently, but Marcus quickly stopped humming and looked away.
"Sorry, miss.
"I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Sarah's heart broke a little at his automatic apology.
You weren't disturbing anyone, sweetheart."
That was lovely. But Marcus had already retreated into himself, the walls built higher by each dismissive encounter. He gathered his things and walked away, leaving Sarah wondering about the musical gift she'd just witnessed. As the day ended, Marcus walked slowly toward the school's exit, unaware that his journey was just beginning. The second week at Riverside Academy brought new challenges for Marcus. Word had spread about the scholarship kid, and whispers followed him through the corridors like shadows. "I heard his dad's the janitor here," Tommy Richardson announced loudly to his group of friends as Marcus passed.
Can you imagine?
"Going to school where your father mops the floors." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He'd learned early that responding only made things worse. The truth was more complicated than Tommy knew. James Williams worked 3 jobs to support his family, and the janitorial position at Riverside was actually the one he was most proud of because it gave Marcus access to this world of opportunity. During Mrs. Chen's class that day, the temperature seemed to drop whenever she looked at Marcus. She called on him less frequently, and when she did, her tone carried an edge that made other students shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Mr. Williams, perhaps you could tell us why you seem so distracted today?" Marcus hadn't been distracted. He'd been listening intently, even helping the student beside him understand a concept quietly. But Mrs. Chen's perception had already been colored by her assumptions. "I'm paying attention, ma'am." "Are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're not taking this opportunity seriously. Some students would give anything to be in your position."
The implication nie vie in the air.
Marcus felt 20 pairs of eyes on him, some sympathetic, others judgmental. His hands clenched under his desk as familiar feelings of inadequacy washed over him. After class, Marcus took a different route to avoid Tommy's group. The hallways of Riverside were maze-like, and he found himself in an unfamiliar wing of the building. The sounds of conversation and footsteps faded, replaced by something else entirely, the distant sound of piano music. Following the melody like a moth to flame, Marcus discovered a set of double doors with small windows. Peering through, he saw a magnificent music room with a black grand piano at its center. An older student was practicing, but the music felt mechanical, technical but soulless. Marcus pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. Without realizing it, he began humming along, his voice adding harmonies and variations that the original piece seemed to cry out for. His fingers moved against the door frame as if playing invisible keys. "What are you doing here?" Sarah Mitchell's voice made him spin around, panic flashing across his face.
I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell.
"I got lost and heard the music. I wasn't trying to." "Marcus, it's okay," she said gently, noticing how his shoulders hunched defensively.
Do you play piano?
"No, ma'am. We can't afford lessons or an instrument." But Sarah had heard him humming, had seen his fingers moving with the music. She'd been teaching long enough to recognize natural talent when she saw it. "Would you like to see the music room properly sometime?" Marcus's eyes lit up for just a moment before caution returned. "I don't think I'm allowed." "Let me worry about that," Sarah said with a smile that made Marcus feel, for the first time since arriving at Riverside, like maybe he did belong somewhere after all. 3 days later, Marcus found himself standing outside the music room after school hours, his heart hammering against his ribs. Sarah Mitchell had given him permission to visit, but doubt gnawed at him. What if someone saw him? What if he touched something he shouldn't? The room was empty, afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows and illuminating dust motes that danced like musical notes in the air. The grand piano sat in the center like a sleeping giant, its black surface reflecting the golden light. Marcus approached slowly, reverently. He'd never been this close to such an instrument. At home, he practiced on a plastic keyboard his father had found at a thrift store, but this was something entirely different. His fingers trembled as they touched the keys for the first time. The sound that emerged was pure, clear, and perfect. A simple C major scale became a revelation under his touch. "Oh," he breathed, the sound barely audible. Without conscious thought, Marcus began to play. The melody that had been living in his head for weeks finally found its voice. His fingers moved across the keys with surprising confidence, creating something beautiful and complex that seemed to pour directly from his soul. The music filled the empty room, echoing off the walls and wrapping around him like an embrace. For the first time since arriving at Riverside Academy, Marcus felt truly at peace. Here in this moment, none of the whispers or stares or dismissive comments mattered. Here, he was exactly where he belonged. The melody grew more intricate, his left hand finding bass lines that supported and enhanced the treble notes. He wasn't just playing, he was composing, creating something entirely new with each passing moment. My God.
The voice from the doorway made Marcus s'en freeze above the keys.
Sarah Mitchell stood there, her eyes wide with amazement and something else, recognition.
Marcus, how long have you been playing?
Panic flooded through him.
I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell.
I know I shouldn't have. No, that's not what I meant. She stepped into the room, her voice gentle but urgent. What you just played, where did you learn it? I made it up. I'm sorry if it's wrong. Wrong. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't mockery. It was wonder. Marcus, that was extraordinary. You were composing. Do you understand what that means? Marcus shook his head, still ready to bolt from the room. Sarah moved closer, her teacher instincts taking over.
Can you play it again?
The same piece. I don't think I can remember it exactly. Then play something else. Anything. Marcus hesitated, then let his fingers find the keys again. This time, a different melody emerged, sadder, more complex, filled with the loneliness and frustration he'd been carrying. The music spoke of late nights listening to his father's old jazz records, of hummed lullabies his mother used to sing, of dreams that felt too big for his small world. When the last note faded, silence filled the room. Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling.
Marcus, you have a gift. A real, extraordinary gift.
But I've never had lessons. Some things can't be taught, Sarah said firmly. They can only be nurtured. And what you have, she gestured toward the piano.
This is something special. Something rare.
Marcus looked down at his hands, still not quite believing what had just happened. What happens now? He asked quietly. Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities and obstacles. Getting Marcus the training he deserved wouldn't be easy at Riverside Academy, where tradition and prejudice often went hand in hand. But she'd seen something today that she couldn't ignore. Now, she said with determination, we figure out how to make sure the right people hear what I just heard. B. Next 3 chapters. James Williams finished mopping the last hallway of Riverside Academy as the clock struck 9 p.m. His uniform was soaked with sweat, his back ached from hours of bending, but his mind was elsewhere, on Marcus and the opportunities this job might provide for his son. At home in their small apartment, Marcus sat at his plastic keyboard with headphones on, his fingers moving silently across the keys. The music existed only in his mind and through the faint vibrations he could feel, but it was enough. It had to be. How was school today, son? James asked, settling into his worn armchair with a tired sigh.
Fine, Dad.
The automatic response came easily, but James noticed the tension in his son's shoulders. Just fine? Nothing exciting happened.
Marcus saisit ta tête.
How could he explain about the music room, about Miss Mitchell's encouragement, about the way the grand piano had felt like coming home? His father worked so hard just to keep them afloat. How could he add the burden of impossible dreams?
There's a nice music teacher there. Miss Mitchell.
She said I have potential. James's weathered face broke into a smile. Of course you do. I've been telling you that for years. But Dad, it's different here. These kids have had private lessons since they were 5. They have instruments worth more than our rent.
What if I'm just fooling myself?
James stood and placed a hand on his son's shoulder.
Marcus, you think he don't hear you at night?
You think I don't know you're composing entire symphonies in your head while you pretend to sleep? Marcus looked up in surprise. Son, music isn't about having the most expensive instrument or the fanciest teachers. It's about having something to say and finding a way to say it. And you, James's voice grew thick with emotion. You have more to say than most people twice your age. The next day, Sarah Mitchell found herself thinking about Marcus during every class. She'd heard thousands of students play over her years of teaching, but what she'd witnessed yesterday was different. It wasn't just talent, it was something deeper, more instinctive. During her lunch break, she approached Marcus in the cafeteria. Would you be interested in coming to the music room during study hall? There are some techniques I could show you, some theory that might help organize what you already know instinctively. Marcus's eyes lit up, then dimmed with worry. I don't want to cause any trouble. Some of the other students already think I don't belong here. Marcus, Sarah said firmly, talent belongs everywhere. And what you have isn't just talent, it's a gift that deserves to be developed. That afternoon, Marcus learned his first formal music theory. Sarah was amazed at how quickly he absorbed concepts that took other students weeks to grasp. Scales, chord progressions, harmonic structures. He understood them not just intellectually but intuitively, as if he'd been born knowing these rules. Try this chord progression, Sarah suggested, showing him a series of complex jazz chords. Marcus's fingers found the keys, but instead of playing the progression as written, he began to elaborate on it, adding variations and embellishments that transformed the simple exercise into something beautiful and unique. You're not just playing the chords, Sarah observed with amazement. You're having a conversation with them. Is that wrong? Marcus, that's exactly right. That's what music is supposed to be, a conversation, not just a recitation. As the session ended, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. There's someone I think you should meet.
Professor Elena Whitmore-Run, the Advanced Music Programmer.
She's challenging, but she recognizes real talent when she sees it. Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. What if she doesn't think I'm good enough? Then she's not as smart as I think she is, Sarah replied with a confidence she hoped she felt. Professor Helena Whitmore commanded respect the moment she entered any room. At 45, she had built a reputation as one of the most demanding and prestigious music educators on the East Coast. Her students regularly won national competitions, earned scholarships to Juilliard, and went on to professional careers. She had little patience for mediocrity and even less for what she considered charity cases. When Sarah Mitchell knocked on her office door that Thursday afternoon, Professor Whitmore barely looked up from the scholarship applications she was reviewing.
Sarah, Job, this is brief.
I have the Peterson boy coming in at 4, and his mother is very particular about punctuality. Helena, I wanted to talk to you about a student.
Marcus Williams.
He's incredibly gifted. The scholarship boy. Professor Whitmore's tone turned cold. Sarah, I appreciate your enthusiasm for reaching out to underserved students, but my program has very specific standards. These children often lack the foundational training necessary for serious musical study. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. You haven't heard him play. I don't need to. His application shows no formal training, no competition experience, no recommendations from established instructors. What exactly am I supposed to evaluate? His talent. His natural ability. Helena, in 20 years of teaching, I've never encountered anything like this. Professor Whitmore finally looked up, her expression skeptical.
Sarah, you're young.
You haven't learned to distinguish between enthusiasm and actual ability. These scholarship students often show initial promise, but they lack the discipline and background for advanced work. The dismissal was clear, but Sarah pressed on. Give him 10 minutes.
One audition. If I'm wrong, you'll never mention it again.
Absolutely not. My students are preparing for the regional competition. I don't have time for pet projects. At that moment, Tommy Richardson burst through the door without knocking, his mother Victoria close behind. Mrs. Richardson wore the confident bearing of someone accustomed to having doors opened for her. Professor Whitmore, I hope we're not interrupting, Mrs. Richardson said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tommy is so excited about the new piece you've assigned. Of course, Mrs. Richardson. We were just finishing up. Sarah felt herself being dismissed, but something in Mrs. Richardson's expression made her pause. The woman was studying her with calculating eyes.
Miss Mitchell, isn't it?
I've heard you've been spending time with that Williams boy.
How charitable of you. The word charitable dripped with condescension.
Marcus is an exceptional student, Sarah replied evenly. I'm sure he is. Though I do hope you're not giving him unrealistic expectations about his place here at Riverside. Some opportunities require certain qualifications beyond mere enthusiasm. Professor Whitmore nodded approvingly. Mrs. Richardson makes an excellent point. Our music program maintains very high standards. Tommy smirked from beside his mother. Yeah, some people need to know their limits. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she maintained her composure. Well, I suppose we'll see about that. As she left the office, Sarah could hear Mrs. Richardson's voice behind her. Helena, you really must be careful about these diversity initiatives. They can be so disruptive to serious students. Walking down the hallway, Sarah's resolve crystallized. Professor Whitmore wanted to judge based on assumptions and prejudices? Fine. But Sarah would make sure Marcus had the chance to prove them all wrong. She just had to figure out how. Sarah Mitchell had always been a fighter, though most people wouldn't guess it from her gentle demeanor. Growing up as the daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses, she'd learned that sometimes you had to create your own opportunities. Now, watching Marcus face the same barriers she'd once encountered, that fighting spirit awakened. The next morning, she cornered Professor Whitmore before classes began.
Elena, y a va proposition.
Professor Whitmore sighed deeply. Sarah, we discussed this yesterday. The regional competition. You said your students need to be challenged, pushed to their limits before the big day. Yes, and what if I told you I had a student who could provide that challenge? Someone who could push Tommy Richardson to perform better than he ever has. This caught Professor Whitmore's attention. Tommy was her star pupil, the son of one of the school's most generous donors, but lately his performances had been technically perfect yet emotionally flat. What exactly are you suggesting? A friendly competition.
Tommy versus Marcus.
Let them both prepare the same piece, perform it for you, and judge for yourself.
If Marcus fail to meet your standard, he'll drop the subject forever.
Professor Whitmore considered this. The idea of motivating Tommy through competition was appealing, and if this Williams boy was as mediocre as she suspected, it would be a valuable lesson for Sarah about realistic expectations. And when this Marcus fails to perform adequately, then you'll have proven your point, Sarah said calmly. But if he succeeds? He won't, Professor Whitmore stated flatly. But very well.
One audition.
Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Give them both 2 weeks to prepare. Sarah's heart leaped. Thank you, Helena. You won't regret this. I already regret it, Professor Whitmore muttered as Sarah hurried away. Finding Marcus in the library that afternoon, Sarah could barely contain her excitement. I got you an audition, she announced quietly. Marcus looked up from his homework, confusion clear on his face.
En audition. With Professor Whitmore.
It's competitive, you'll be performing against Tommy Richardson, but Marcus, this is your chance. The color drained from Marcus's face.
Miss Mitchell, he can't compete against Tommy.
He's been taking lessons since he was 5. He has a piano at home worth more than my dad makes in a year. But you have something he doesn't, Sarah insisted. What? You have music in your soul. Tommy plays notes.
You speak in melody.
Marcus shook his head frantically.
What if he mess up?
What if I prove everyone right about me not belonging here? Sarah sat down beside him, her voice gentle but firm. Marcus, I've seen what you can do when you think no one is listening. I've heard the music that comes from your heart. That can't be taught, can't be bought, and can't be faked. But I don't even know this Chopin piece. I'll teach you. We'll work together every day after school.
Marcus, talent like yours commence à l'homme consigne à génération.
Don't let fear keep you from showing the world what you're capable of. That evening, Marcus sat at his plastic keyboard, trying to imagine the rich tones of a grand piano. His father had gone to bed early, exhausted from his multiple jobs, but Marcus could hear him stirring in the next room. Dad.
Marcus called softly.
What is it, son? If you had a chance to do something that might change everything, but it also might end in complete failure, what would you do? James appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes. Is this about that audition your teacher mentioned when I saw her at school? Marcus nodded. Son, I've been working 3 jobs for 8 years to give you opportunities one never had. But opportunities are worthless if you're too scared to take them.
What if I'm not good enough? James sat on the edge of Marcus's bed. What if you are?
Marcus, I've watched you create music out of thin air since you were 7 years old. I've seen you turn a broken keyboard into an orchestra.
You think he don't believe in you.
But these people, Dad, they have everything. They've been training their whole lives.
And you've been living music your whole life.
There's a difference between training and calling, son. And you, James's voice filled with pride. You were called to this. See, next 3 chapters. 2 weeks later, the music room felt different to Marcus. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a courtroom where his future would be decided. Professor Whitmore sat at her usual spot behind the piano, her expression unreadable. Tommy Richardson was already there, looking confident and polished in his perfectly pressed uniform. Sarah Mitchell stood near the windows, offering Marcus an encouraging smile that didn't quite hide her own nervousness. Mr. Richardson, you may begin, Professor Whitmore announced. Tommy approached the grand piano with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. His performance of Chopin's Nocturne was technically flawless, every note precise, every dynamic marking observed, every phrase shaped according to traditional interpretation. When he finished, Professor Whitmore nodded approvingly.
Very good, Tommy.
Clean execution, proper technique. Your mother will be pleased. Tommy smirked in Marcus's direction as he took his seat. Mr. Williams, Professor Whitmore's voice carried a tone of polite skepticism. Whenever you're ready. Marcus approached the piano on unsteady legs. His hands trembled as he adjusted the bench, and for a terrifying moment, his mind went completely blank. The room was silent except for the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then, something miraculous happened.
Ice Finger touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The fear, the judge, the whisper, all of it melted away, leaving only Marcus and the music.
But what emerged wasn't just Chopin's Nocturne. It was Chopin filtered through Marcus's soul, transformed by his experiences, his pain, his hope. The melody soared with the emotional depth that made Tommy's technically perfect performance seem hollow by comparison. Marcus played with the passion of someone who understood what it meant to long for something beautiful in a world that often felt harsh. Every phrase told a story, of lonely nights, of dreams deferred, of music that existed in his heart even when he had no instrument to voice it. The famous Nocturne became something entirely new under his touch, yet remained faithful to Chopin's genius. He added subtle variations, harmonic colors that existed between the written notes, creating a performance that was both respectful and revolutionary. When the last note faded into silence, the room remained still for what felt like an eternity. Professor Whitmore sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, her usual composure completely shattered. In 30 years of teaching, she had never heard anything like what had just occurred. This wasn't just a performance, it was a revelation. Tommy's confident expression had evaporated, replaced by something resembling awe and confusion. Sarah fought back tears, knowing she had just witnessed something extraordinary. Professor Whitmore began, then stopped, her voice failing her. Marcus, unaware of the impact he just made, looked up anxiously. Was that okay? I know I changed some things, but the music seemed to want. Stop, Professor Whitmore whispered, holding up a trembling hand. Just stop. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to the room. When she turned around, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. In all my years of teaching, all the prodigies I've trained, all the competitions I've judged. She paused, struggling to find words. I have never heard anyone make a piano sing like that. The room erupted in shocked silence. Tommy stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. Mr. Williams, Professor Whitmore continued, her voice strengthening, I owe you an apology. And I owe you something else, the chance to develop this extraordinary gift properly.
Marcus blinked in confusion.
Does that mean? It means, Professor Whitmore said with growing excitement, that everything just changed. The news of Marcus's audition spread through Riverside Academy like wildfire, though the details varied depending on who was telling the story. Some claimed it was a fluke, others whispered about Professor Whitmore's uncharacteristic emotional response, but those who had been in the room knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. Professor Whitmore spent the entire evening after the audition in her office, replaying Marcus's performance in her mind. She had prided herself on being able to identify talent, but she had nearly dismissed what might be the most gifted student she would ever encounter. The next morning, she made a phone call that would change Marcus's life forever.
Elizabeth, it's Elena Whitmore.
I need you to come to Riverside immediately. I found someone you need to hear. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the renowned composer and former head of the New England Conservatory, had been Helena's mentor decades earlier. If anyone could properly evaluate Marcus's abilities, it was Elizabeth. Helena, you know I don't make house calls for student auditions. Elizabeth, I'm 65 years old. I've taught thousands of students. Please trust me when I tell you that this is different.
Something in Elena's voice made Dr. Harper pause. Différent how?
Different like the way Horowitz was different. Different like the way Rubinstein was different. Elizabeth, this boy doesn't just play music, he transforms it while honoring it completely. Dr. Harper arrived at Riverside Academy 2 days later, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her presence commanding immediate respect. She had agreed to this unusual request partly out of curiosity and partly out of respect for Helena's judgment. Marcus was practicing in the music room when they arrived, completely absorbed in working through a Bach invention. Dr. Harper stopped in the doorway, listening intently. He's playing Bach, she murmured to Helena. Just wait, Helena replied. What Dr. Harper heard next defied her expectations. Marcus wasn't simply playing Bach's notes. He was engaging in a musical conversation with the composer himself. Each phrase was perfectly structured yet spontaneous, technically precise yet emotionally rich. When Marcus finished and looked up to see two women watching him, panic flashed across his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was." "Don't apologize," Dr. Harper said firmly, stepping into the room.
Am Docteur, Elisabeth Harper.
"Professor Whitmore tells me you have something special to show me." Marcus looked to Helena nervously.
Should he play the Chopin again?
"Play whatever speaks to you," Dr. Harper replied, settling into a chair. Marcus turned back to the piano and began to play something none of them had heard before, one of his own compositions. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, complex in its simplicity, mature beyond his years yet unmistakably the work of someone still discovering the world. Dr. Harper's eyes widened as the music unfolded. This wasn't just talent. This was artistry of the highest order combined with compositional ability that suggested musical thinking far beyond formal training. When Marcus finished, the room fell silent. "How long have you been composing?" Dr. Harper asked quietly. I don't know if I'd call it composing."
I juste plewat hier in my head.
"And how long have you been hearing music in your head?"
Marcus tugt fort un moment.
"Always, I guess. Even before I knew what a piano was." Dr. Harper looked at Helena with an expression of amazement. "Helena, do you understand what we're looking at here?" "I'm beginning to," Helena replied softly. Dr. Harper turned back to Marcus. "Young man, what do you know about musical theory?"
Harmonie, composition.
"Miss Mitchell has been teaching me some basics, but mostly I just feel what sounds right." "Feel what sounds right," Dr. Harper repeated wonderingly. "Marcus, you've just performed a composition that demonstrates understanding of harmonic progressions that graduate students struggle with. You did this by feeling." Marcus nodded uncertainly. Dr. Harper stood and walked to the piano, playing a complex chord progression. "Can you continue this pattern?" Without hesitation, Marcus's fingers found the keys, not only continuing the pattern but developing it into something more sophisticated and beautiful.
My God, Docteur, Harper breathed.
"Helena, this boy isn't just gifted, he's a musical genius in the truest sense of the word." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in.
What happen now?
Marcus asked quietly. Dr. Harper smiled, her eyes bright with excitement. "Now, Marcus, we make sure the world gets to hear what we just heard." Word of Dr. Harper's visit and her glowing assessment of Marcus reached Mrs. Victoria Richardson within hours. As one of Riverside Academy's most influential board members and largest owners, she was accustomed to being informed about anything that might affect the school's prestigious reputation, or her son's position within it. She scheduled an emergency meeting with Principal Sterling the next morning. "Robert, I'm concerned about the disruption this Williams situation is causing," she began, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "Parents are asking questions about academic standards and whether we're maintaining our commitment to excellence." Principal Sterling, a man who had learned to navigate the delicate politics of private education, chose his words carefully. "Victoria, from what I understand, the boy demonstrated exceptional ability." "Robert, let's be realistic. These scholarship students often show initial promise, but they lack the consistency and discipline of students from established musical families. Are we really going to allow this school's reputation to be compromised by social experimentation?" Mrs. Richardson's tone remained pleasant, but her meaning was clear. The Richardson family's annual donations could fund entire programs. "What exactly are you suggesting, Victoria?" "A proper evaluation. A real test that demonstrates whether this boy can perform under actual pressure, not just in the comfort of a practice room with sympathetic teachers." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone.
Il propose a formale compétition. Tommy versus Marcus.
Same piece, same conditions, but performed in front of the entire advanced music program and their parents. Let the community see for themselves where the real talent lies. Principal Sterling felt uncomfortable with the obvious setup, but he also understood the political realities of his position. "And if the Williams boy performs well, then we'll know he deserves his place here," Mrs. Richardson replied smoothly. "But Robert, between you and me, do Do you really think a child with no formal training can compete with Tommy's years of professional instruction? In front of a real audience, under real pressure. Meanwhile, Tommy Richardson was struggling with his own crisis of confidence. His performance against Marcus had shaken something fundamental in his understanding of his own abilities. For the first time in his life, he had encountered someone his own age who made music in a way he couldn't comprehend, much less replicate. That evening at dinner, his frustration boiled over. "Mom, there's something different about that kid. When he plays, it's like the music is alive." "Tommy," his mother replied firmly, "you've had the finest instruction money can buy. You've won competitions, earned recognition. Don't let one impressive moment from an untrained student undermine your confidence." "But what if he's actually better than me?" Mrs. Richardson set down her fork, her expression hardening. "Thomas Richardson, you're not going to let some scholarship student make you question years of dedicated training. You have advantages he could never dream of: proper instruction, superior instruments, a musical heritage. Use them." The next day, Principal Sterling approached Professor Whitmore with Mrs. Richardson's proposal. Helena listened with growing dismay as he outlined the plan for a public competition. "Robert, this isn't about education, this is about humiliation. They want to set Marcus up to fail in front of an audience designed to be hostile toward him." "Helena, I understand your concerns, but we have to consider the political realities. Mrs. Richardson has significant influence here, and frankly, her support helps fund programs that benefit all our students. And if Marcus performs brilliantly, what then?" Principal Sterling paused. "Then we'll have learned something important about recognizing talent wherever it comes from." When Sarah Mitchell heard about the proposed competition, she immediately sought out Marcus. "You don't have to do this," she told him. "This isn't about music, it's about politics and prejudice." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Mitchell, what if they're right? What if I got lucky that one time, and I really don't belong here?"
Marcus, I've heard you play dozens of times now.
"What you have isn't luck, it's gift that grows stronger every day." "But what if I fail? What if I prove everyone right about kids like me?" Sarah felt her heart break a little. "And what if you succeed? What if you prove everyone wrong about kids like you?" That evening, Marcus sat at his plastic keyboard, weighing his options. Through the thin walls, he could hear his father moving around the apartment, preparing for another night shift. The choice, he realized, wasn't really his alone. It belonged to every kid who had ever been told they didn't belong, every dreamer who had been dismissed before being heard. He made his decision.
D. Finale Trichapté.
The week leading up to the competition transformed Riverside Academy into a battlefield of whispered conversations and carefully chosen sides. Parents who had never paid attention to Marcus Williams suddenly had strong opinions about his place in the school's music program. Dr. Elizabeth Harper returned to campus 3 days before the performance, ostensibly to judge the competition, but actually to ensure that Marcus received fair treatment. She had spent sleepless nights since their last encounter, researching young prodigies throughout history and finding disturbing parallels to Marcus's situation. "Helena," she said privately, "I've seen this before. Society loves to discover genius, but only when it comes in the package they expect. When it arrives in an unexpected form, they try to diminish it." Meanwhile, Marcus threw himself into preparation with an intensity that worried both Sarah and his father. He arrived at school early, stayed late, and spent every free moment in the music room. But his practice sessions revealed something remarkable. Under pressure, his gift was growing stronger, not weaker. "He's not just learning the piece," Sarah observed to Helena. "He's making it his own, while somehow making it more Chopin than Chopin himself." The night before the competition, James Williams found his son sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. "Having second thoughts?" James asked gently. "Dad, what if I'm not what they think I am? What if Dr. Harper and Miss Mitchell are wrong?" James sat down across from his son. "Marcus, let me tell you something I've never told you before. Your mother, God rest her soul, she was musical too. Not like you, but she had a voice that could make angels weep. Marcus looked up in surprise. His mother had died when he was 6, and his father rarely spoke about her. She used to sing you to sleep with melodies she made up on the spot, said you were the only baby she knew who would calm down for original compositions but fuss at lullabies everyone else loved. James smiled at the memory. She told me once that you weren't just listening to her music, you were learning from it, even as a tiny baby. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I wanted you to discover your own relationship with music, not feel obligated to live up to hers. But son, what you have, it's not something you learned. It's something you inherited, something you were born with. James reached across the table and took his son's hands. Tomorrow, when you sit at that piano, you won't be just playing for yourself. You'll be playing for your mother, for me, for every kid who's been told they don't belong. But, most importantly, you'll be playing because music chose you, not the other way around. The morning of the competition, Marcus woke before dawn. He dressed carefully in his best clothes, still second-hand, but pressed with love and pride. As he walked through the empty hallways of Riverside Academy, he felt a strange calm settling over him. In the music room, he sat at the grand piano one last time before the audience arrived. Instead of practicing the competition piece, he played something else, a melody that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than memory, something that connected him to his mother, to his father's sacrifices, to all the music he had ever dreamed of making. Tommy Richardson arrived 30 minutes later to find Marcus finishing this mysterious composition. "What was that?" Tommy asked, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. "Just something I was thinking about," Marcus replied simply. Did you write it?" Marcus nodded. Tommy sat down on the piano bench beside him. "Can you teach me how to do that? Write music, I mean?" The question surprised them both. For a moment, the competition, the politics, the social barriers between them seemed to disappear. "I don't think it can be taught," Marcus said thoughtfully, "but maybe it can be shared." As parents and students began filing into the music room, both boys understood that something had changed between them. The competition would proceed, but it was no longer about proving superiority. It had become something else entirely, a celebration of different kinds of musical truth. Dr. Harper entered the room and surveyed the assembled crowd. She recognized the mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation that always surrounded moments of potential greatness. "Louisa and gentlemen," she announced, "you are about to witness something remarkable. Not a competition between students, but a demonstration of music's power to transcend every barrier we place in its path." The room fell silent as Marcus and Tommy took their places, ready to discover what truth the music would reveal. The music room had never held so many people. Parents filled every available chair, students lined the walls, and faculty members stood in the doorway. The tension was palpable. Some faces showed eager anticipation, others barely concealed skepticism. Mrs. Richardson sat in the front row, her expression confident. She had orchestrated this moment to definitively prove her son's superiority and put the Marcus situation to rest once and for all. Principal Sterling introduced the competition with careful neutrality, but Dr. Harper stepped forward before he could continue. "Before we begin," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of decades in music education, "I want everyone here to understand what they're about to witness. Musical talent isn't about privilege or training. It's about the human spirit finding its voice through sound. Today we celebrate two very different but equally valid approaches to that expression." Tommy performed first, and his rendition of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 was flawless. Every technique his expensive lessons had taught him was on full display. Precise fingering, perfect timing, traditional interpretation. The audience applauded appreciatively, and Mrs. Richardson beamed with pride. "Excellent work, Tommy," Dr. Harper acknowledged. "A technically superior performance that demonstrates years of dedicated study." Then it was Marcus's turn. As he walked to the piano, the room's energy shifted. Some audience members leaned forward with curiosity. Others sat back with arms crossed, already decided about what they expected to hear. Marcus sat at the bench and placed his hands on the keys. For a moment, he closed his eyes and let the music find him the way it always had, not as notes on a page, but as a living conversation between his soul and the universe. When he began to play, something magical happened. The same Chopin ballet that Tommy had just performed beautifully became something entirely different under Marcus's touch. Where Tommy had played the notes perfectly, Marcus played the emotions behind the notes. Where Tommy had demonstrated technical mastery, Marcus revealed the composer's heart. The music soared and whispered, thundered and caressed. Marcus didn't just perform the piece, he inhabited it, transformed it, made it speak truths that Chopin himself would have recognized and celebrated. As the performance continued, the room underwent a transformation. Skeptical expressions melted into wonder. Parents who had come to prove a point found themselves moved to tears. Even Mrs. Richardson's confident facade began to crack as she realized she was witnessing something beyond her understanding. When Marcus played the final, delicate notes, the silence that followed was profound. It was the silence of people processing something that had touched them in places they hadn't expected. Dr. Harper was the first to speak, her voice thick with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just heard is the difference between playing music and being music. Both boys demonstrated remarkable skill, but Marcus has shown us something rarer, the ability to transform notes into truth. The applause began slowly, then built into something thunderous, but more telling than the applause were the faces. Parents who had come to judge were now looking at Marcus with something approaching awe. Tommy was the first to stand, applauding with genuine admiration. His mother remained seated, her worldview crumbling around her. Professor Whitmore stepped forward, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I owe this young man an apology," she announced. "I nearly let my preconceptions prevent me from recognizing extraordinary talent. Marcus Williams doesn't just deserve a place in our advanced program. He deserves our commitment to helping him reach his full potential." Mrs. Richardson finally stood, her face pale but determined. The room fell quiet as everyone waited to see how she would respond to her son's gracious defeat. She began, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in years, Victoria Richardson found herself without words. It was Tommy who broke the silence. "Mom, I want to learn to do what Marcus does, not to beat him, but to understand what music really means." The simple honesty of his request seemed to shatter the last of his mother's resistance. She looked at Marcus. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "I have something to learn as well." Dr. Harper smiled as she watched the room full of people grappling with their assumptions and prejudices. Music, she reflected, had once again proven its power to reveal truth and transform hearts. 3 months later, Riverside Academy's music room buzzed with activity that would have been unimaginable before Marcus Williams arrived. The advanced program had doubled in size, drawing students who had previously felt excluded from classical music's elite circles. Marcus stood at the grand piano, but this time he wasn't alone. Tommy sat beside him on the piano bench, and 3 other students surrounded them with various instruments. They were working on a composition Marcus had written, a piece that blended classical structure with jazz harmonies and contemporary rhythms. "Try it again, but this time let the violin answer the piano's question instead of just echoing it," Marcus suggested to Amy Chen, a talented violinist who had found new confidence under his collaborative approach. Professor Whitmore observed from across the room, marveling at the transformation in her teaching philosophy. Marcus hadn't just joined her program, he had revolutionized it. His instinctive understanding of how to nurture rather than critique had made every student better. "Helena," Dr. Harper said, entering the room with a folder of papers, "I have news." The full scholarship to the New England Conservatory's Young Artists program was more than Marcus had ever dreamed possible, but the real surprise was Dr. Harper's next announcement. "They don't just want you as a student, Marcus. They want to study your compositional process, understand how you create music intuitively. You could help them develop new approaches to musical education." Sarah Mitchell wiped away tears of joy. "Marcus, do you understand what this means?" "I mean I get to keep learning," Marcus replied simply. "But more importantly, it means other kids like me might get chances too." The celebration was interrupted by Principal Sterling's arrival with James Williams, who was still wearing his janitor's uniform but carried himself with new dignity. The community's recognition of his son's gifts had somehow elevated his own standing. "Dad," Marcus called out, running to embrace him. "I'm proud of you, son, but I was proud of you before any of this happened." Mrs. Richardson appeared in the doorway, hesitant but determined. Over the past months, she had undergone her own transformation, volunteering to help fund scholarships for underprivileged students. "Marcus," she said formally, "I wanted to apologize again for my initial response to your talent, and to ask if you might consider tutoring Tommy in composition this summer." "I'd like that, Mrs. Richardson. Tommy has great musical instincts. He just needs to learn to trust them." Tommy grinned. "And I need to learn to hear music the way you do." As the group dispersed and the school day ended, Marcus remained at the piano, playing softly. The melody was new, something hopeful and forward-looking, filled with possibilities rather than limitations. Dr. Harper lingered to listen. "What's this one about, Marcus?" "It's about second chances," Marcus replied. "About what happens when people choose to see what's really there instead of what they expect to see." "What do you see when you look ahead?" Marcus smiled, his fingers finding new harmonies on the keys. "I see music everywhere, waiting for people brave enough to let it speak through them. I see kids like me getting chances to show what they can do. I see a world where talent matters more than assumption." The melody swelled, filling the room with hope and promise. "Most of all," Marcus continued, "I see music bringing people together instead of keeping them apart." As the last notes faded, Dr. Harper realized she was witnessing more than a talented boy's success story. She was seeing the beginning of a movement that would change how the world thought about music, talent, and the power of keeping an open heart. Dear friend, this story reminds us that extraordinary talent exists in every community, waiting for someone brave enough to recognize it. Too often we let assumptions about background, appearance, or circumstances blind us to the brilliance right in front of us. Marcus Williams represents countless gifted individuals whose potential goes unrecognized simply because they don't fit our preconceived notions of what talent looks like. Every child deserves the chance to discover and develop their gifts, regardless of their family's financial situation or social status. True educators and mentors see beyond surface differences to nurture the spark of greatness wherever it appears. Let's commit to keeping our hearts and minds open to the unexpected genius that surrounds us every day. If this story touched your heart, please like this video.